and it's 8:05. So I'd like to welcome everyone and introduce myself to you. I am Women's League International VP and Programming Chair. And we're going to discuss the Catskills, very dear to me. For me, the summers in the country really shaped my life and who I became. My parents met at the Fairmount Hotel in Kiamish Lake, and they honeymooned at the Granite in Kerhonkson, which is always a funny word to me. And my sister and I both met our husbands at the Tamarack Lodge. And so sharing this talk with my Women's League sisters makes perfect sense to me, because so many of us have personal histories and memories of wonderful times upstate. And for years, maybe even decades, Debbie can help me with this, Women's League conventions were held at the Concord Hotel. That was prior to my involvement, unfortunately. So this was a very enthusiastically supported Women's League program. So before I begin, I would like to introduce Debbie Kaner-Goldich. She is International President of Women's League for Conservative Judaism. Debbie.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. Good evening to everyone. It's wonderful to be together with all of you tonight. I want to thank the leadership of Midway Jewish Center Sisterhood for co-sponsoring this event with Women's League. I know that they and Grace have worked very hard to present this to all of our members tonight. And as Grace said, we have almost every one of our 13 regions represented. So for those of you who've been to the Borscht Belt, I know you will enjoy this presentation. As Grace said, Women's League held their convention every other year at the Concord, where 2,000 women came from all over North America on buses and airplanes and took over the whole place. And it was like Camp Women's League. Yes. So Women's League looks forward to sharing more events with you and your individual sisterhoods. And through the magic of Zoom, all of our members can join in on programs all over North America. And for more information on that, please read our weekly newsletter, which is called Women's League Week. It lists many opportunities for learning and engagement. And everyone who belongs to a sisterhood is a member of Women's League. And as a sisterhood member and a Women's League member, you're entitled to attend all of those programs. One program I just would like to highlight tonight is on Monday, January 25th, Paula Scheuer. Many of you know Paula Scheuer, who's the kosher cook. She's doing a Tu B'Shvat cooking demonstration for 3 different recipes good for Tu B'Shvat. There is a small charge for that program. We do not charge for probably almost all of our programs, but we do charge for that program because there is a cost for the organization to pay for Paula Scheuer. So if you would like to register for that, it is listed in Women's League Week. It came out this afternoon, and there was a registration button there. So thank you again to Midway Jewish Center Sisterhood. And I have to say that I grew up in Massachusetts and did not ever get to the Borscht Belt until I was married. And my husband and I went to the Nevele at least 3 times with friends and had a wonderful time. So that's as close to the Borscht Belt as I got as anyone, as an adult or a child. So I thank you again for welcoming me tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing from our speaker.
Okay, thanks for being with us, Deb. And also with us tonight, we have Women's League Executive Director, Rabbi Ellen Wollensfields. Can you unmute yourself? And
sure.
Where are you?
Okay. I'm right here. I'm hopefully, oh, yep, she found me. So it's good to see everybody. As you heard, I'm Rabbi Ellen Wollensfields, and I grew up in Brooklyn. So we went to Kutcher's, and it was really fantastic to go. It was also because my dad was a busy doctor and we never went on vacations anywhere. And my mother's cousin actually directed and wrote Dirty Dancing. So I feel like Borscht Belt is like part of our family life. And also to bring you some Torah, as we heard earlier today, some of us on the board, that Faye was talking about darkness of the choshech, of the plague that we read about in our Torah reading. And let us think about the opposite of darkness, which is light. And first of all, going to the Borscht Belt always brought lightness to everybody, and being together with our Women's League sisters brings light into the world. And another word for light is just chesed and goodness and was great that last year was Chesed, this year is Bayacha together, and it's wonderful to be together and remember to have light in our lives and joy as well. So thank you very much, and a special mazel tov to Grace. I see the pillow in the background, being grandparents for the first time. So mazel tov to you.
Thank you. And we would like to just recognize Terry Field. She is the president of Midway Jewish Center Sisterhood, my own sisterhood. Terry, give us a wave.
Thank you so much, Grace. And I just wanted to thank Women's League of Conservative Judaism for partnering with us tonight. I want to welcome everyone. And personally, as I was listening to everyone list, I realized that as a child, my dad's lodge used to go up to the hotels every year to have their annual big hoopla. And we would go for the weekend. And I'd been to the Concord, the Stevensville, the Granite, Kutchers, and the Nevele. And as a matter of fact, brought our family back to Kutchers when my son was very young. And the funny story my sister-in-law always tells is Kutchers is that at that point was kind of at its end. And her sons went to Italy that summer, but they told her they had a better time at Kutchers. So thank you so much again for joining us tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Tara. So now to begin our program, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Marissa Scheinfeld. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, and raised in the Catskills, and received her BA from the State University at Albany and her MFA from San Diego State University. Her work is motivated by an interest in the landscape and is embedded in histories both apparent and hidden. In October of 2016, Cornell University Press released her first book entitled The Borscht Belt, Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land. Let me read you just a brief review from Dr. Phil Brown, founder and president of the Catskills Institute and University. In photographing the ruins of the great Jewish resort area, Marissa Scheinfeld taps our memories of the great golden age of the Catskills and fills our hearts with recollections. In their whirlwinds of color, these photographs sing the history of the hotels and bungalow colonies, putting us at ease by the pool, at sport on the handball courts, and always at the table in the dining room. It is a joy to step into these vivid images and relive such an important historical phenomenon. So Marissa, we welcome you and thank you so much for being here with us. As you can see, the enthusiasm is here for you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen so that you're not seeing me, that you're seeing the Borscht Belt. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And just give me a minute to pull this up. All right, so the Borscht Belt. This book came out in 2016, late 2016. It was a labor of love about the land that I love. I worked on it for about 5 years, obsessed with finding out every detail that I could, traversing as much of the landscape as I could. And I called it Revisiting the Remains of America's Jewish Vacation Land because I loved that word revisiting, to go back to a place where we've been, where so many of us have been, and if not us, maybe a friend or a family member. I grew up there, so my parents still live there today. And, in so many ways, the project is based on my life. It stems from my experience of moving up there from Brooklyn as a child in the 80s, being a teenager and working at some of the hotels. And then really, as an adult and a photographer, it culminated with an exploration, a 5-year exploration with a larger fascination, not only with the place that I was from and about the place that I was from, but about deeper rooted issues about time, space, landscape, and place. And it's really a reflection on the passage of time. The Borscht Belt was located 90 miles from New York City, and its proximity from New York City really is what allowed it to thrive. So in red is the county, Sullivan County, highlighted, but it was also comprised of a little bit of Orange County and a little bit of Ulster County. It's important to say that my book does not focus on every single hotel, because when I began this project in late 2011, so many of the hotels had been demolished. Many others had been repurposed. They are meditation centers, ashrams, prisons, rehabilitation centers. So this is a map that's in the book. And in blue are all the hotels I went to, and in gold are the bungalow colonies. So roughly, in my exploration, I went to all these places dozens of times, about 50 different sites that I found. And really, you know, these sites that I went to, and we'll see them in a bit, Kutcher's, smaller places like the Commodore, big places like Grossinger's, and little places like Lesser Lodge and the Rosemont Hotel, they were considered behemoths. They were these looming creatures of failure from an era that was so prominent, but the fallout and the stagnation of the region for 20, 30, 40 years has left these really modern day ruins. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through the rise and the fall of the Catskills. We're going to talk about its impact and the luscious chaos I found in its landscape. Sorry, this slide always repeats. I want to read it though. Photographers deal in things which are continually vanishing, and when they have vanished, there is no contrivance on earth that will make them come back again. And that is by Henry Cartier-Bresson. And it was a very, very kind of poignant quote that I preceded when I really looked at this project. So here we go. I like to call this time traveling. This is an image that one might have seen zipping up Route 17 in 1965. And it just gives you a little bit of a selection of what the New York Times said was 538 hotels and 50,000 bungalows. That's not bungalow colonies, but little singular unit bungalows. The Browns, the Windsor, the Aladdin, Gilbert's, Levitt, Majestic, Evans, Shady Nook, so many places. The Borscht Belt was a year-round vacation destination catering to American Jews. It offered leisure, entertainment, socialization, a place where people could come together. People went year after year to the same hotels, some frequent different hotels. Each hotel had its different flavor, its price point, its kind of menu of offerings. And here we see the Laurels on the left, on the top, and on the bottom, the Flagler Hotel. This is the Imperial Room at the Concord. When it was built, it seated over 3,000 people, and it was the biggest showroom in the United States. Models for showrooms that eventually were built in Las Vegas and Los Angeles and even Miami. This now is the Neville Stardust Lounge of equal weight, tremendous lounge, and this is the Twizzle Stick Lounge at the Raleigh. One of the really amazing things about doing this project was kind of the vibrant timeline that I was able to piece together by finding all of this ephemera, which is in the book, as well as my own photographs. An early brochure, Sullivan County #1 in the nation for a zestful, restful vacation. So when I sat down after 5 years to write an essay in the book, I wrote one of the 3 essays in the book. The first words, the first thought that came in my mind is really where the essay begins. And it goes, I grew up in the mountains, or as others called it, the country, as if no other mountain or country existed any place else on earth. And I think for a specific time and a great number of people, everyone here probably, and more, this declaration really has a certain truth. My grandparents met when my grandmother was hitchhiking somewhere between Fallsburg and South Fallsburg, and that is my paternal side, who went up there year after year. And my mom's parents went to multiple bungalow colonies and vacationed in Worsing and in Monroe. And, you know, it was really impossible growing up to not hear a story of times gone by, of the heyday, driving in the car, of how vibrant the area was, how crowded it was, the memories, the entertainment, and really the tall tales. And anything that I heard, and a little bit experience working as a teenager in the Concord as a lifeguard, really the word fun, it echoes fun. And as the rabbi said, it's light. It was that beautiful, cherished, lovely moment in American Jewish history, a history that has been so woven with darkness and with tragedy, especially when we kind of look at the Borscht Belt and its place in time coming off of the tail of World War II. But I knew that I really needed to do my homework. I wanted to understand why the Borscht Belt began, but why it ended. And I really needed to kind of start at the very beginning, if you will, like Julie Andrews always says. So I looked at the earliest history of the region. And then this is just a short abridged history. I promise I know you're here for the Borscht Belt. But the Lenape Indian tribe were the first settlers of the region. Their present day territory includes New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley, and parts of Connecticut. They were a very peaceful hunter-gatherer tribe. And eventually what happened is that European and Dutch German settlers heard of the rumored riches of the Catskills, and that's not money, that's resources, that's natural land. So think of a very rocky, mountainous, rugged landscape, inaccessible truly to the cities like New York and Philadelphia. But this is an early drawing predating the history of photography, probably from the late 1700s, of Mongup Falls in Sullivan County. European settlers came into the area and they started to create the first industry that Sullivan County saw. The Borscht Belt was the third. This first industry was the lumber industry. So this very rocky, woodsy, tree-filled landscape, they would cut down trees and log them down the Delaware River to build up cities like Philadelphia and New York. With this early industry, there started to be some inns and some restaurants along the kind of places to eat along the river, but largely it was a desolate industrial region. What began to happen was after much of the natural resources were depleted and a lot of the trees were knocked down during the Civil War, the second industry that came upon Sullivan and Ulster and Orange County was the tanning industry, and they tanned leather from the bark of trees. And this is the Wurtsboro Tannery. And with the tannery came railroads, came roadways, and Sullivan County began to become more accessible. This is Hanford Mills, a tannery in 1895, and on the top is the Monticello Tannery that burned down in 1924. The first travelers to the Catskills or the Borscht Belt region were not Jews. They were artists, they were writers, they were fishermen and lovers of nature. And this is one of the first earliest hotels at the bottom, which is the Beaver Kill Inn, which is known for fly fishing. In addition to being a kind of early destination for lovers of nature, the Catskills beckoned painters and artists. And this is a very famous painting by Asher Durand. It's called Kindred Spirits, and it depicts Catterskill Falls, or the Catskills, right in the background. And you have these two men contemplating at the edge of a rock, and this painting has been discussed and unpacked and written about so much. It has memento mori and different objects that signify really the beauty of nature and all we can kind of understand and so much that we cannot understand about it. Really impactful painting of the Catskills. So around this time, 1900, Sullivan County caught railroad fever, and this is the Kiamish Casino in 1900. Boosted by the railroads, the tourism trade that began with fishermen and writers and lovers of nature began to blossom. Once a very desolate, industrialized region, Sullivan County, in not that long of time, became a tourist destination. It offered visitors fresh air, clean water, local produce, and entertainment. This is an early postcard. It's not from the Borscht Belt per se, but it's from the Catskills, a little bit north of the Borscht Belt. It shows kind of the offerings of what was there. So good hunting, freshwater fishing, pretty girls, winter sports. Elves playing ninipins is something that I've yet to see in the Catskills, but would be a magical sight. This is the regatta at White Lake in 1907. I used a lot of different resources. Phil Brown, whom Grace spoke of, who's a Catskill historian, John Conway, who's Sullivan County historian, and also the Catskills Institute. I will put a link to that at the end of the talk. It's where I found many of these images. So around 1900, what you have is this industry that starts to build. But what you also have is the emergence of sanitaria. And the idea is that those afflicted with tuberculosis should go up to the Catskills and breathe fresh air, and that would alleviate a lot of symptoms. So on the top is the Loomis Sanitarium, which is still there, and on the bottom is the Workman's Circle. Locals really despised, frankly, that the area was becoming known as a haven for the sick, and there was a lot of pressure on the sanitaria owners to close. In addition, the polio epidemic had struck, and a lot of people were very kind of cautious. There were a lot of health concerns in the 20s, and people were told to avoid large crowds and big gatherings. And it echoes a lot of what is going on today in a different way. But as a result, many of these early hotels that catered to early visitors closed, but they were there and the place was accessible. So here what you have is the beginning of the Borscht Belt. This is a magazine distributed in this country in 1908. It's called Jew Jokes. In the first half of the 20th century, discrimination against Jews was widespread. Anti-Semitism affected employment, social club membership, and vacation access. This is a beautiful pamphlet, a watercolor paper and photography pamphlet from the Craigsmoor Inn in 1910. The Craigsmoor Inn sits on the Shawangunk Mountains, right above Ellenville. So if you've ever been in Ellenville, near the Neveline, you look up at those mountains, that's the Shawangunk Mountain Ridge. Really beautiful, beautiful brochure. I'm going to point your attention to the left side of the slide, page 2. Owing to neighborhood preferences, Hebrews are requested not to apply. I've seen many different documents, many brochures, many letters from people with quintessentially Jewish names applying for jobs, looking to vacation. And I saw a letter from the Mohawk Mountain House that said, "Dear Mr. Silverberg, we do not employ your kind." So this hatred, this anti-Semitism, this persecution, it is nothing new. But out of that, comes this Mecca for American Jews, recognizing a growing Jewish immigrant population with a desire to experience America, to experience an American lifestyle without being persecuted and without being shunned away. Jewish investors in New York City and entrepreneurs began to purchase properties in the region, specifically small farms, boarding houses, and small hotels. And this is a postcard from one of the earlier hotels, the Lennon Hotel on the right, and the railroad station that used to go right into Liberty. Greetings from Sullivan County, really the beginning of the Borscht Belt, born out of anti-Semitism and this kind of place where Jews went to escape that. This is Grossinger's, the original main house, 1914, 1919. They went up, it was a farm, started taking in boarders, Kuchelanes, and all of these very small kind of farms. But eventually Grossinger's is really one of the biggest names in the Catskills. On the left is the original main building, and on the right is one of the earliest staff with the matriarch, Jenny Grossinger, sitting in the front left. Grossinger's, really, its slogan was Grossinger's had everything, and it did. This was the indoor Olympic-sized swimming pool, built by a man who built the Fontainebleau, and many other hotels in Miami, Morris Lapidus, many hotels in Vegas, Grossinger's. It had its own airport. It had an indoor-outdoor ice skating ring, indoor-outdoor Olympic swimming pool. It had its own zip code. It had everything. But there were so many other hotels, right? So Hotel Zeiger, this is a 1957. They all had this very chic mid-century modern design. Some of them changed names. So when I found the Hotel Zeiger, it had been called the Palms, but previous to that, it was called the El Dorado. And each hotel competed with one another for the bigger acts, the better acts, food and offerings. And this is the Concord. So my grandpa Jack was a card shark, and him and my grandmother owned a condo in Kutcher's. They had a small condo community. It's still there. It's called Hidden Ridge. So as a child, because my grandparents had this condo, I remember on the weekends, I would get dropped off at the Concord. And, looking back, it had a fraction of the foot traffic that I've read about. But I remember this staircase, and I remember wildly running up and down it. But in my research, what I found about this staircase was that it was built by Morris Lapidus, the same man that built that pool at Grossinger's, and it was just built for aesthetic purposes so that people could walk down it and move into the lobby in their elegant nightwear and the Concord. near and dear to my heart. This is the Falls View, which is still open, but under a kind of a different name. It's called Honors Haven. But I love this postcard. This postcard to me really encapsulates so much of the Catskills. You see the community, you see the people, you see the beautiful architecture and the land behind it, that majestic mountain. This is the Olympic pool and poolorama at the Laurels. In my research, I met a former manager of the Laurels, and he said the slogan was, go to the Laurels and lose your morals. From what I understand, each hotel kind of catered to a different type, whatever you were looking for, whether you were single, family. I found hotels for Jewish cross-dressers. I found so many different hotels, so many different places. This is the new indoor pool and health club at the Laurels. And it turns out that that gentleman out there in the green jacket is my friend's father. He was pulled in for the photo. He worked there. And, you know, I'm sure everyone has these little stories, and, you know, even just doing this project has just kind of opened up this Pandora's box of so many more stories that I've learned about. This is the Browns. This is the Jerry Lewis showroom, 1968, that beautiful red curtain and this just tremendously kind of like vibrant, you can almost hear the clanking of the glasses and the people speaking and talking. These are just some other images I found, women playing mahjong at one of the bungalow colonies. So in the book, I have two essayists. One is Jenna Weissman-Josselitz. She is a historian. She also teaches at GW. She runs their Masters in Jewish Cultural Arts. And Jenna just writes such an eloquent and witty book. Essay. And one of the things she writes is, you know, in the Catskills, photography in the Catskills was like cream cheese to bagel. They just kind of went hand in hand, you know, because you have here someone making an image of these people at the pool, although she's in this like high heels, and then someone behind them making an image. And it's really like, what is photography? That's its purpose, to document, to give us that slice that we can go back and we can relive through that moment, through that frame. And photography is abundant when it comes to the Catskills. People love to document their memories. This is Lou Simon Says Goldstein, the tumbler, like the MC, the guy that kind of got everyone on their feet. I was fortunate enough to become really great friends with his late wife, Jackie Horner. I never met Lou, but he definitely is a legend, and he played Simon Says 1985 at Grossinger's at 10:30 and 2:35 every day. This is a dining room at Kutcher's. So like I said, my grandpa was a card shark. We went into the hotels, but it's funny, like as a kid, when I look back, we kind of snuck into the hotels. And as an adult doing this project, I kind of did the same. We were never guests, and I never sat at a Borscht Belt dining room. But if I could speak on what it is this photograph for me. It is a loud, rambunctious room full of people. You have all these people seated at table 89. It is copious and bountiful of food. From what I've heard, you could order 5 steaks and send them all back, and then order 5 juices and all the desserts. And I love the narrative in this photograph. So clockwise, we have this girl in glasses sweetly looking on, the man blowing his nose, then the woman with the great black hair. She's kind of handing something to the woman across the table, but the man in the middle is like choking because he's trying to eat. And then there's another gentleman just not even looking at anything, and he's looking at his food, and they're just kind of sitting there. And to me, this is like the Jewish dining experience. It is just like full. And this is all the staff of the dining room. So, you know, of course, like the people, the guests, but really also the workers, the people whose livelihoods were built upon, you know, this industry, and its fallout has really just like been a big problem for the county over time, as you will see. But getting back to the food, this is a menu from the Nemerson, 1969, July 29th. Each hotel issued these. Sometimes they were on fancy paper. Later on, they were on kind of like cheap copy paper. But nevertheless, they had the icon, the hotel, the font, which was great. And this is good afternoon. So you have 3 different types of juice, 4 types of soup, about 7 entrees, 6 cold plates, 8 desserts. Mr. Julius Katz is the maitre d'. And then on the right, the events, indoor pool, happening with Murray Waxman, which I would love to attend that. Bingo, arts and crafts, and then all the things going on, swimming, and then the nightclub. So really just wonderful pieces of documentation that I have, not only in the book, but there's a traveling exhibit that accompanies this book. Esther Manor, so another hotel, smaller hotel on Route 17. So in the Borscht Belt, there were 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotels. Hotels like places that weren't even hotels, like kuchelanes, where you would make your own meal. There were bungalows. There were kosher style, not kosher at all. Really just so many. And then, of course, we can't really talk about the Borscht Belt without talking about the bungalow industry. Over 50,000 bungalows. This is just one page of 3 different colonies. There were so many. But this is Slavin's Bungalows for the finest in vacations. It offered a new pool and music festivals and evening activities. Then there's Wist Wigwam in Ferndale, who I actually ended up meeting the owner at a talk like this, and Rosenberg's Bungalow Colony. This is probably my favorite image that I found of the Catskills, that these 4 women seated at a bungalow colony in Monticello in 1943. I love it because of not only the composition, you see them seated and then you can kind of look at they seem so classy and beautiful with their hair and their outfits. And then you see the bungalow in the background and it feels just like a really nice, warm summer day. Of course, I looked into my own family archives. A lot of the times when I've kind of shown up in person at a talk, there's sometimes snickers like, oh, you don't know about the Catskills, or you're too young. And, yes, I did not experience it in the way that many others did, but it is in my blood. This is my great grandmother at a bungalow colony in Fallsburg, on the top with my dad and aunt. And the bigger picture on the right is my mom and her family in Ellenville at Woolworthing Bungalow Colony. And on the bottom left is my grandmother with her sister. This is a group of men playing cards, but one of them happens to be my grandfather. So going into my own family archives was really a wonderful way to continue the research. This is my great grandma, and this is me at the at Kutcher's with my grandpa Jack. And when I think about these times, I'm full. My heart is full, but it's also very bittersweet. My grandfather's no longer with us. I had a son a year and a half ago and named him after him. But nevertheless, the Borscht Belt, this is for the visitor of the Borscht Belt who is so busy having fun that you just check off your experience. So it's called the Take It Easy Dizzy correspondence card. So, dear husband, I am lonely. This place here is rainy. I do lots of reading. I need cash. Business is improving. I wish you would come here. I miss you. I will be seeing you. So all different towns produce this. There was always a different drawing. It was usually not a photograph and a beautiful illustration. Oh, Paul Newman. So it's like kind of like unavoidable to talk about the Catskills as well when you think about the celebrity presence, because it was the place to be. So from Paul Newman to Eddie Cantor and Elizabeth Taylor, but previously he brought up another woman there to get married. You have Duke Ellington, Sammy Davis Jr., Louis Armstrong, so many people just coming up there for vacation, to film movies, to stay, to perform. You have dignitaries like Eleanor Roosevelt walking through the dining room and Dr. Martin Luther King speaking at a rabbinical conference at the Concord. This is Golda Meir in the dining room at Grossinger's. So, just like, we all loved it. It was just like loved by everyone. It was the place to be. In addition to the entertainment factor, as well as the big cultural, historical figure presence, the Borscht Belt had a big sports training program. So you have Floyd Patterson, Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, Wilt Chamberlain, who rose to NBA fame, was a bellhop at Kutcher's. So there's also a very long sports history. And then, I think when I encounter someone that knows nothing about the Borscht Belt, really it's stand-up comedy that truly helped put it on the map, because you can say names like Mel Brooks, Woody Allen, Freddie Roman, Henny Youngman, Seinfeld, Joan Rivers, that's Marilyn Michaels, Rodney Dangerfield, Sid Caesar, and it's really the place where so many of these entertainers told their worst jokes. I found some notes in Rodney Dangerfield's archives that were mountain jokes, and he was trying out his jokes to bring them to stages in New York City. And so many of these comedians graduated to mainstream television and movies, and that's really where the Borscht Belt kind of just blends in and just like meets popular American culture. I remember seeing billboards for Seinfeld when I was in middle school before he was even a household name. This is Milton Berle, and just kind of like more images of that nightlife and of that comedy and that legacy that the Borscht Belt has left us. And it's contemporary things like Mrs. Maisel that are educating more of the youth about that. This is a great little movie called Catskills Honeymoon. It's available for free to watch online. You can go to the National Center for Jewish Film, and that was like a big Yiddish celebratory movie about the Catskills honeymoon experience. And then there's been so many things, recordings of comedy, Mickey Cats, and female comedians recording in the Borscht Belt. Now we're kind of zipping through time. In the 1970s, historians say the area started to decline in 65. And many of the hotels in the 70s started to have singles weekends, different conferences, in an effort to just get the crowds back. And this is a beautiful series that I found by Ronnie Stevens Goodman. This was in the Forward a few years ago. And I love the color. I love the time period. These singles, most likely their parents had been to the Catskills and they were kind of continuing the legacy. And this is 1980s at the Pines. I love her and her whole outfit and her sunglasses and her bold attitude. In the late 70s, and this work was recently released by the Library of Congress, a photographer named John Margolis drove across America, and in his driving stopped in the Catskills and photographed these hotels in 79 and 80 when most of them were empty. But the Library of Congress recently released them, and what I love about them is I think that, at least for the purposes of this, I want to show you his work, but also kind of cross over to when the hotel started to dwindle in foot traffic. And this is the same lake that I was at Kutcher's. And these are all headlines that came out of the Times in 1996. That summer, I worked at the Concord as a lifeguard, and we were told the hotel was going to close. And these are all headlines that happened that fall, and I'll read them. In Catskills resorts, death darkens the view. Our town's and a tradition, a resort at twilight. Grocingers to remain closed during Passover. Hotel in Catskills sold to Brooklyn Company, and the hills were alive with the sound of tumbling. I think that there's so many reasons we could all sit here and list off what killed the Catskills. People love to say it was the boom of the airline industry, where now air travel was cheaper. The cruise industry, where you can go to 5 countries in 4 days, the growth and the proliferation of the suburbs, where people weren't schlepping up to the Catskills anymore. They were moving to Jersey and Long Island and had a little lawn. Some people say air conditioning. Some people say it was feminism and the changing role of women in the workplace, where women weren't camped out up in the Catskills and they were entering the workforce, and family dynamics changed. Others like to say that the Catskills simply didn't keep up. It didn't keep up with the modern era. And also in the era when the Catskills declined was probably one of the most impactful and intense decades in American history. You have the 1960s being the war in Vietnam. You have the feminism movement, sexual liberation movement. You have Woodstock. You have so many thoughts, so many things, so many kind of actions happening in the country. And the world shifted and changed. And I remember my dad saying, he went up there every summer, and in 1969, he hopped a plane to Paris. You know, really, the important thing to note is in 1965, the Anti-Discrimination Act was signed in this country, and Jews, people of color, people that were prohibited from traveling outside of their little spheres were now allowed. So, you know, there's so many reasons. And I think that's just, it's not black and white. It's a multitude. It was almost like this perfect storm. But the legacy that has been left behind is just unbelievable and continues to this day and will continue. And in the book and in the exhibit, I have these photo viewers and matches and beautiful pieces of stationery, and all of these things have become huge collector's items on eBay. So if you are thinking of ever getting rid of these, please contact me. I will take them off your hands or buy them from you and include them in my exhibit, or figure out a way for you to get them to the Catskills Institute. So, you know, I kind of gave you a little bit of the history. I'm from there. And, you know, when I started to think about, you know, what I wanted to photograph, like, of course I looked to see what existed. So I saw that there were so many books about the Catskills. There were memoirs, there were archival books, there were interview books, there were books about the bungalows, books written by comedians, book written by historians. And then there were the quintessential movies like Dirty Dancing, A Walk on the Moon, Sweet Lorraine, a sort of sleeper hit, and Billy Crystal's Mr. Saturday Night. For me, though, you know, what happened was, as I was in graduate school, I was living in San Diego, and my previous projects were all about Jewish history. I had done a project on Holocaust survivors. I had photographed extensively throughout Eastern Europe and come back and photographed a group of Holocaust survivors in San Diego. And I guess I could sum it up by saying that I was never interested in taking a pretty picture. I always was looking for more content, more of a story. And I was really grappling with what to do. I was living in this beautiful sunny place. I was very uninspired, frankly, and considered dropping out of school. And my mentor gave me some advice. And that advice really was the fire that lit inside of me to do this book. And he said, when you don't know what to shoot, you shoot what you know. Shoot what you know. So I think that is applicable to writers and artists and anyone, to go to the source, go to you, who you are, what is your story. And if you can tell it in a way that's authentic and real, and just let it be, maybe others will listen and others will hear and look. So shoot what you know. That's really how I began. I knew my hometown had this vibrant past. I knew many of these hotels were sitting there like these monsters, these huge compounds abandoned. So what I did was I started with this technique. It's called rephotography. It's the act of repeat photography with a time lag. So it's like a now and then. And it's something that photographers have been doing for a very long time, this technique. It's a visual method used to understand change. So I would take a postcard of the many that I had started doing lots of research, and this is the lakefront promenade at the Laurels. And using that postcard like a treasure map, I would go to the Laurels. And rephotography is pretty precise. It's very kind of sciencey, where you have to find the perfect angle and the vantage point where that photographer was standing when he or she made that image. And this was really kind of how the project began. I would find an image. This is the indoor-outdoor ice skating rink at the Pines. And then I went to the Pines. And then I put the images together side by side. And this was really kind of like where a light bulb went off in my head. What happens over time? What does it change? What stays the same? What's different? What is the story in the landscape? How has it evolved? And I thought this was going to be the project, this kind of now and then. And this is the new indoor pool health club at the Laurels when I found it. And then you kind of put them together. And when you're on with rephotography, it's really exciting, but it can also be a little frustrating. But what began to happen was I would go to the Laurels, for example, that day, and I would become distracted because I would see something else that would call me to make a photograph, something that stood out. And I realized there was much more of a story to tell than this now and then. So the book begins with that rephotography series, but leads into the photographic series itself. I photographed over 50 different places, went multiple different times. Each hotel has a different story of why it closed, when it closed, and I'll try to clue you in on that, as well as talk about this and these as photographs, because that's really, this is a photography book. Grossinger's closed in '89. It was bailed out twice in a bankruptcy, and in between that bailout, they started to build a new lobby. So this kind of metal structure is the carport that they were building, and that never got built. So here I am kind of wandering up this disused driveway, trying to kind of understand what was going on. And because the golf course, when I started to photograph, was still open, I had met one of the golf course groundskeepers, and he gave me a tour. So a lot of these kind of sites ended up being these kind of serendipitous things where I just spent a lot of time there and forged friendships and just learned as I went. went. These are stairs to the Tansville Hotel that burned in a big fire. The pool was completely gone, and the only thing left were these two beautiful stone pillars. And I looked at them as like these structures that had persevered despite the razing and burning of the entire hotel. And if you ever get a chance to go to Sullivan County and you drive down its many long, windy roads, you'll notice two stone pillars all over the place, because they were indicative of an entrance to a former bungalow colony, a hotel. Often there's nothing there but those stone pillars that are just in the ground. This is the Paramount Hotel in Parksville. So initially I was looking for remnants. I was searching for any evidence, any place where the Borscht Belt happened. The Paramount Hotel eventually became a Best Western, and then it closed, and it is since for sale. But when I was at the Paramount Hotel, I saw these shuffleboard courts, and I was evoked of a memory of playing shuffleboard with my grandpa Jack at Kutcher's. Then I made this for him. And I started really to just see all of these things that were happening. This abandonment was obvious, right? This entropy, this just deserting of these places. This is the lobby at the Homoac Lodge. The Homoac was sold to an Orthodox group that turned it into a boys' camp. And then eventually they had some problems with the land. The hotel was recently sold at auction. I'm not really sure what's going on with it, but I loved how this lobby looked really quiet, almost like the hotel was still open in a way. You have these curtains hanging and this beautiful morning light coming in. Some hotels I trespassed, and some I got permission. I would always prefer to get permission. And I always went with someone because I never knew what I would find, and I really just wanted to be focused on photographing. But they're very kind of turbulent places. This is the Stardust Room at the Nevele. And I love that gold lame curtain that's hanging, and that curtain is hanging in the postcard, which was amazing. An unknown bungalow colony in Liberty, New York. I was never able to find the name of this casino, but really, what was happening, the neglect of humans on the landscape and the leftovers and almost the residual wreckage. When I started the project, this was actually called Leftover Borscht. That was the first title of the book. This is a guest room at the Paramount, devoid of a bed, but you have these two lights, and those lights are so iconic because those are those reading lights, and they're really about like American travel. You can kind of see my hands there. This ended up being a self-portrait. I don't move anything. I don't touch anything. Everything is left to time, chance, nature, other people that may have gone in there before me. I kind of think of myself as an archaeologist, although unlike an archaeologist, I'm not chiseling the surface, I'm not touching it, I'm not manipulating it. Everything is as I've found it. I'm using natural light. I'm using a medium format camera with film. I don't manipulate the images. I don't put color where color isn't. I think photography is a really powerful medium. This is Cooper's Sunrise Bungalow Colony in Rock Hill. I think photography is incredibly powerful, but it also has the ability to be very misleading. And my religion with it is very much straight photography. Like what you see is what you get. And what I saw that day at Cooper's was exactly what I thought a bungalow colony is. Adorned in some beautiful sunlight, a little rickety and rusty, some leaves in the gutters, and kind of homey and warm. Cooper's Sunrise Bungalow Colony, the last I passed it, was being knocked down. This is the Lesser Lodge in White Sulphur Springs, New York. People were living in one of the main buildings. They had converted it to a house, but I found this pool, and I just saw that creeping like moss along the pool. And, there was a lot of things going on. Besides the abandonment, what I saw was these scenes that felt like apocalypse, where the chef stacked the pots and pans and never went back to work. And I will reiterate that I don't set up these scenes. This is as I've found them. And just seeing these pots and pans, seeing these laundry rooms full of sheets, and then you see the rust and the patina of time. It really felt like people just kind of left. One of the things that Jenna Weissman-Jossel writes, and I'll read it to you in the book, she writes, whatever the reason, the abandonment of the Catskills was volitional. No external forces insisted on it. No outside powers expelled the Jews from this patch of land. The Catskills didn't give up the ghost. American Jews gave up on the Catskills, and then and only did it collapse on itself. When American Jews mourn its passing, which they do often loudly, they have themselves to blame. How fitting then, these architectural fragments, like tombstones or totems, they mark the spot where Jews learn to modernize and Americanize, to relax and have fun. The Catskills was where American Jewry came of age. And I always follow it up with, well, they came of age, but they never went back home. We went other places because previous to this, we were banned. This kitchen in the Nevele, feels kind of cold and architectural, but I love that light that was coming in. This is Hotel Leroy, a very small hotel on the ruins of Sullivan County Community College in Loch Sheldrake, New York. And this tension between Mother Nature and history was something that I began to find as I was kind of probing beneath the surface. And, when Jenna wrote the word totem pole, this image to me is a totem pole. This is the tamarack. The tamarack burned in a fire. Shortly after the fire, I was working on the project and found the granddaughter and was able to kind of get access. But there's no museum dedicated to the Catskills. There are no historical plaques that line its roadways. There's nothing. And as I was doing the project, something internally just compelled me to do it. I really couldn't put my finger on it and I couldn't vocalize it. And people would tell me, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Why are you going there? There's nothing there. Even my own father said, why do you want to go to Grossinger's all day? There's nothing there. And now, I can say, well, you're not looking. You're not looking because there's so much story here. There's history, there's memory, there's individual, there's collective memory. And then there is this elevator shaft that managed to survive the ravaging of the whole hotel. And it really sits like a totem pole, like a tombstone, like we were here. I am working with the American Jewish Historical Society to get some plaques and markers in the county. It's like, even though I've moved on from this book, it still follows me because I feel like there's work to be done there. Photography is an act of preservation. So even though this image of the overpass of the Pines is the guts of the hotel and maybe is an unpleasant sight, this is the hotel as it existed. And while this book is about the Borscht Belt, it's really the Borscht Belt through a very contemporary lens. It may be nostalgic, but it's not intended to be nostalgic. It may pull on the heartstrings because it did that for me for sure. But this is peculiar beauty, strange forms. There's a really amazing writer, Rebecca Solnit. She said, landscape is visible. Too often, history is not, or assumes strange and unrecognizable forms. This is the Black Magic showroom at the Commodore. It was full of seats at some point with shows and comedic acts and music acts. And then one day those seats were pulled out and some kids decided to make a skate park in there. And this strange repurposing was something that I found in the Catskills. It may be kind of odd and peculiar. Why a skate park? Why? Because there's nothing else to do. Growing up in the Catskills, I would never change it. But after the 90s, when all the hotels closed, when there was no movie theater, there was no mall, there was nothing but a Chinese restaurant and the Bagel Bakery. Even those restaurants like Lefty's and Busby's, they all folded. Most of the kids in the area really got into trouble. And what has happened is a lot of these hotels have become these places of entertainment. So this is the dining room at the Pines, no longer a dining room. It was a paintball battlefield. Paintball is a game. People play with guns and pellets of paint and they shoot it at each other. So for me, a photographer, hot pink chairs, could not walk away from those. They're gorgeous. And then I saw the colors of paint and the pink walls and all of these layers and these textures to me kind of unfolded. You have the past, the present, and the future. This is the lobby at Grossinger's, not the original one, the one that they were building when they went bankrupt. So my theory is at the top, they started painting it. Below, they spackled it, but they never finished it. And graffiti artists and squatters and scrappers and people have gone in there. And actually, Grossinger's was completely torn down about 2.5 years ago with a project unnamed in the works. Of course, the book, yes, it's tragic, it's sad, there's a melancholy that runs through it. But I also think sometimes with tragedy, there's comedy. And things like this would just stop me and make me smile. You know, who set up table 12 for me at the Homoac? Put those napkins and the glasses and fake fruit and plates. I did not touch this. This is just what I found. The process of just going back multiple times. And of course, I'm not the only one there. There are people going there, kids going there, scrappers, vandals, people living there. I love this image. This is an image at the Nevele. This is the ski chalet. I feel like this image is a conversation. It's like the backs of the chairs are all heads of people, and they're all facing each other, and they're all engaged with one another. And we have this beautiful light pouring in and this gorgeous architecture. And then there's some remnants of birds that have kind of shed their feathers, and the process of life and the cycle of life. There's a lot going on here for me. This is the indoor pool, that beautiful pool built by Morris Lapidus that should have been deemed a historical site, and was not, and was ravaged. So, when I think about photography, I truly think about it as an act of preservation in itself. And, kind of looking back, unsure about why I was doing the project, but felt it was important. Now, 4 years later, the book came out 4 years ago, half of the sites in this book are gone. They're not even a ruin. They're nothing. There's nothing there. Or there's a new condo built on its land, and one would never know what was previously there. This is the Persian room at the Pines. If you can look deep in the photograph, you see that red, beautiful curtain. That curtain rose and fell for so many shows. And then, of course, as you move out, you see the insulation that has plummeted from the ceilings and the work of graffiti artists and Mother Nature who started creeping through, really reclaiming. This is the Palms, formerly El Dorado and the Zyger. And all you could see the day that I found it was the S. Everything else, it was like Mother Nature was swallowing up the hotel. And I remember a couple of years after I made this image, I drove by the Palms and I saw these condos there. And frankly, they were really ugly condos. And it was like then that I realized, like, I was really glad that I made the book. No matter what the hotels looked like, it was documented. And, who would know all of these bands, the Shirelles, Jethro Tull, Janis Joplin, all of these people that frequented these hotels, and all of these memories that were made. The greenhouse at Grossinger's, just as alive as it was when it was open, but really untamed and wild. Stairs from one area of the Pines outdoor pool leading up to another, and kind of an up close version of them where you're not really sure where the man-made and Mother Nature kind of collide, and they're having this strange battle, but we kind of know Mother Nature usually prevails. This is the outdoor pool at the Pines. Someone had thrown a blue chair in it, but I thought that blue chair worked well with the rim of the pool, which was blue, and that blue sky. And the lawn chairs in the back almost looked like dinosaur bones. It felt like the La Brea tar pits to me. And there were these strange kind of narratives coming through. The lobby at Esther Manor. How long does it take for grass to grow through a carpet, for that carpet to become an inch of moss and a layer of moss? This is the guest room at the Jenny G building, and it kind of encapsulates the type of photographs that I want to make in the future and aim to make, ones that capture the past, present, and future in a single frame. You have the past, which was the Jenny G building, and Jenny G and was kind of the girl at Grossinger's, and the present was the bird among many other birds I found living in that whole building. It was like a sanctuary for birds. They were flying everywhere. And the future was this little tiny plant growing up out of the ashes of a fire. This is basketball courts at Kutcher's. It was important for me to go in all 4 seasons. All 4 seasons show different light, different colors, different textures. And I loved the blue sky and the red on the basketball hoop and those tracks of animals that had been the only ones at Kutcher's. Kutcher's closed. Now what happened was they demolished it and it became a yoga center. It's called Yo One. This is the White Lake Mansion House. You saw it in an earlier postcard when I showed the railroad station. Again, another very historical hotel with no significant kind of markings. This is the cover of the book. I think when I made it, I knew it was going to be the cover. You know, it reminded me of like a vanished world, a different vanished world than like the one that Roman Vishniak photographed, but nevertheless a vanished world. This lawn chair just looking almost perfect, though, in the rest of the hotel's demise. I never knew what I would find. Sometimes it would be like this, like a plant growing up to my knees through ice, through foundations. And that sublime, that kind of serendipity was really what kept me going. This is the outdoor pool at Perlin's in Glen Wild, and I call her Sleeping Beauty because someone had thrown dirt in the pool to kind of like cover it up, but you're not like, can't throw dirt in a pool, but it became a forest, and I literally creeped through these ivy, and that's why I call her Sleeping Beauty, because the vines were like a canopy. This is the outdoor pool at the Nevele. It was important to me that each image was not solely about detritus and decay, but that was hard at times when I was going to places that were sitting for 20 or 30 years. When I had photographed the Nevele, it had only been closed for about 3 or 4 years. The Nevele had plans to become a casino. That plan was not approved. The casino did open on the grounds of the Concord and Breezy Corners, which I'll show you. This is the Lennon Hotel in Liberty, very early hotel. A hallway at Grossinger's, which I didn't open the doors. I opened the shutter on my camera and made this image. It took about 8 minutes, and it has like this spooky effect of a Stanley Kubrick film. This is just kind of a behind the scenes. I always tried to get permission. Sometimes I would get kicked off sites. Not everyone was always receptive, but these are just some kind of behind the scenes of friends who helped me, police who kind of, you know, like realized I was there to stay and was not tampering with these places, but honoring them and leaving them with respect. This is another image of the tamarack, that past, present, future. The past is the tamarack, the present is that unmade bed and the phone I found off the hook, and the future is Mother Nature kind of creeping in through that greenery. And I love how the green and then the other side of the frame is black, and it's kind of like the dark and the lightness in all of us. A prayer book that I found opened to a singular passage, cards scattered. Everything just kind of left. Ice skates, and then some ice skates that had been through some rougher times, but I think equally beautiful. I use all natural light, went to these places many, many times, just tried to study and document everything that I saw. This was a log book at the Concord. This is the outdoor pool at Grossinger's. Someone had thrown a kitchen sink out there, and never really knowing what I would find. But this is something that you can't walk away from as a photographer, this kind of oval patch of ice, and these strange landscapes, peculiar landscapes. The Browns, there was a peculiar fire at the Browns. People were living there. They were condos, and I was able to get access only to the pool. You can see the fire was being put out as I was photographing there. But it was important to me to have the Browns in the book. This is the ice skating rink at the Nevele, which I think will be preserved. I hope the Nevele reopens. It's a beautiful, gorgeous ice skating rink. Here we are inside of it. This gorgeous pagoda, mid-century, modern, like lovely structure. This is Breezy Corners. The day I drove by, there was a demolition crew knocking down Breezy Corners. And, you know, photography means light. The word photo means light. So the light was beautiful that day. And photography goes hand in hand with light. So I said, oh, what should I do? Should I come back later? And I said, no, I'm just going to knock on the trailer. So I knocked on the trailer of the crew and opened, the door opens, and it's my friend JJ from high school. And he was working on the demo crew. So I quickly begged them to let me photograph before they knocked down Breezy Corners. And they gave me a hard hat, and I photographed Breezy Corners that day. And this is the Revolution Room at Breezy Corners. And then in the background, those sand piles are where they built the new casino, which up until the pandemic was open, was not doing that great. I think the nature of casinos, we know, but it did bring a lot of jobs and has contributed to a real burgeoning renaissance in the Catskills. This is the Concord. And if you've been to the Concord, you might have remembered those pine trees that lined the driveway. I used to get so excited when I saw the pine trees. But when I made this image, the Concord had been knocked down and I felt really displaced. It felt almost like a tsunami had hit me and the earth. But I saw those pine trees, so I needed to include them. This is an aerial view of the Concord. So 50 years since the passing of the Borscht Belt, it really has left its scar on Sullivan County, which has suffered culturally, economically, in so many ways, but still remains a beautiful region. And if you look past the scar and you look past the detritus and the decay, there is still a land that beckons people and continues to do so. And there are many different towns that are undergoing a renaissance: Narrowsburg, Callicoon, Roscoe, Livingston Manor, Rock Hill, Mountaindale, Allenville. Monticello and Liberty have a little catching up to do, but there is a new, and although what was can never be created, there is a new cycle of life that ushers through. And this image of the Rosemont Hotel is kind of that. It's this beautiful fern growing out of the remnants of an old pool. This is the last image that I'll wrap up with, and it's the coffee shop at Grossinger's, and it ends the book. The book has 129 photographs and 3 essays, and this image to me is really like the end of the empire, devoid of a counter. I'm going to wrap up with one passage that I'd love to read to you. It's from a book called The Works of Love by Wright Morris, and I include it in the book because it's everything that I feel about the project. In the dry places, men begin to dream. Where rivers run sand, there is something in man that begins to flow. West of the 98th meridian, where sometimes it rains and sometimes it doesn't, towns like weeds spring up when it rains and dry up when it stops. But in a dry climate, the husk of the plant remains. The stranger might find, as if preserved in amber, something of the green life that was once lived there, and the ghosts of men who have gone on to a better place. The withered towns are empty, but not uninhabited. Faces sometimes peer out from the broken windows or whisper from the sagging balconies, as if this place, now that it is dead, had come to life. As if empty, it is forever occupied. I consider the book an elegy to the Borscht Belt, but at the same time, I consider it a celebration. There's a website, borschtbeltbook.com, and my website where you can go. I have talks coming up. There was a museum exhibit at the New York State Museum that was supposed to open in June of 2020, but due to the pandemic, there is a delay. But the traveling exhibit will open at the New York State Museum, I hope, this year. For anyone that attended the talk tonight, if you're interested, and I will copy and paste this and put this in the chat, you can purchase the book for a discount. It's $10 off the book at Cornell Press. And I just want to thank the Women's League. Thank you all for your time. And I hope that this talk pulled on your heartstrings, maybe brush your memory, maybe you learned something new, and also that you might see the book as not solely sad. Because even though I think it is sad and I think it is bittersweet, I think there's so many elements of it that is complicated and also beautiful. And I think that's the way life is. It's a little bittersweet. So that is the link to Cornell Press's book, and that's the discount code 09FLYER. Of course, you can get it anywhere else, independent bookstores, Barnes and Noble, the devil that I like to call Amazon, but Cornell Press will offer you a discount. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Yes. Well, thank you, Marissa. I mean, your book is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Oh, let me show you the book. So it's a coffee table book, A size. It has 129 photos. It has essays and ephemera, and it's a nice read. I think.
It is. It is, and it is a beautiful coffee table book. It also makes a beautiful gift for somebody else who has that connection and that pull. So you can put your questions in the chat. You can raise your hand if we can find you.
Sure. So someone wrote, please show my website again. So I'll put in the chat So I have a website, and then the book has an official website, borschtbeltbook.com. And then that link and the flyer is there too.
Jack Gostel had a hand raised.
Hi, Jack. Yeah.
So you can unmute yourself, whoever signed
I
in.
think you show up on as Jack.
Okay.
Yeah, you had posted the link to your website. I think I have some old stuff from the Cherry Hill Hotel before 1945.
Oh, well, if
And
you want to reach out to me, I'd love to.
that's exactly, I mean, I have to
Yeah.
go into the chat and copy the information.
Yeah, so yeah, and then I'm gonna put something else in the chat. I don't mean to inundate the chat, but this is a link, and I'll screen share it real quick just to show you because it's amazing. This is the Catskills repository where I got all the stuff. So you can type in whatever, like let's type in the Concord. So you type in the Concord, and then you can go and you can see all different images, brochures, picture of the pool at the Concord, and you can download these. So there's a lot of really amazing things, and he's been collecting, and you know, there's thousands and thousands of things on this website, and that's where I did a lot of research.
You could also contact me. I know how to communicate with Marissa now. And just in case you didn't get all those emails down, you could always reach out to me, gshessler@wlcj.org. Is there anybody else that has a question? You could put it in the chat or raise your hand.
Well, thank you everyone for these really beautiful comments. Sherry and Herb and Marla and Judy and Joelle and Carol, Bonnie. Thank you, Sue and Ronnie. I think someone had a question.
Thank you so much.
Cheryl, thank you.
Hi, did you mention that you are from Rock Hill?
Yeah, so my parents live in Rock Hill. They moved up to Kiamisha Lake in '86. I was 6 years old. They still live up there. They live in Rock Hill, and I'm actually going to go temporarily live up there for a little while. I'm working on another book this spring. But yeah, they live in Rock Hill.
I own a house in Davos, which is in Rock Hill.
Yeah, so my parents are on Old Sackett Road, so they're on the road that's next to Emerald Green, but they're not in Emerald.
Okay. But also I wanted to mention is that my grandfather owned a bungalow colony right next to the Homo Act. And I was, from the time I was born till about 9-10 years old, I was there every summer. And then
I think that's still there, that bungalow colony.
It was right up the road. Like if you faced the Homo Act, it was to the left, there was a road that went all the way up. Yeah. Everything is down because I go to visit it. But he sold it to the Homo Act, and they did nothing with it. And it
yeah, you know, this is the problem. It's like, I know that like a lot of people balk at my photographs, and it's like, you have to really consider like when you have an industry and you have a fallout and you have people that don't go back, you know, this is what happens. There's big problems. There's problems in the town. There's neglect. There's landowners, there's owners that just don't take any accountability. And you know, I don't really get into it in the talk, but you know, in the book's essay, there's environmental issues going on here with Grossingers sitting for 40 years rotting with oil tanks in the ground and water issues. And you know, it's a bigger issue. So you know, there's a lot of complicated things going on in the Catskills, and like many other industries and towns in America, this is not unique. This is kind of a story of America, like Detroit, Rochester, Massachusetts, and industry and then fallout.
It's sad.
I do see a question here that there was a photo of the Workmen's Circle. Yeah. When was that photo taken, and at what point did the Workmen's Circle move to Sylvan Lake?
Oh, I don't know the answer to that question right now, but the Workmen's Circle was there, and there was another worker, a Furrier Hotel that I have research on. Yeah, I'm not sure right now off the top of my head, but I found that image on the Catskills website of the Workmen's Circle, so he probably has the dates.
Hi, Marissa. Someone asked a question about the Stevensville and Swan Lake and wanted to know if there's any info on that place
Yeah,
now.
so the Stevensville was purchased by the Orthodox. So in the 90s, many Orthodox swooped in and bought a lot of hotels and bungalow colonies. So what you have now going on, really, like in kind of the politics of the county, is certain towns that are completely Orthodox. They're shuttered in the winter and they're booming in the summer. With the bakeries and food and all of these things. But with locals, there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of uneducation about like the way the Orthodox live and the way that the locals live, and there are some problems. But overall, what you have in the Catskills is really kind of this smorgasbord of like Orthodox, locals, like teens and kind of youth that are going up there that like want that Catskills experience. And there's lots of repurposed bungalow colonies and many new hotels opening, small hotels, not Borscht Belt hotels, but like little boutique hotels, and Airbnb is huge up there. What's happening in Mountaindale? Yeah, so Mountaindale was in the Times not long ago, and they did a really interesting article because it's owned by one man who has allowed all different artisans to have rent free for a year and have their shops, and they're trying to reinvent Mountaindale. So there's a gallery and a coffee shop and a place to eat, and there is a Vietnamese restaurant, and they're trying to get something going in the old high school, which is abandoned. So they were either trying to get a brewery there or some sort of offshoot of like a MoMA PS1 or something up there, the last I heard.
Well, I don't see any more questions, but I see about 40 compliments from I love your voice to your
Yeah. Oh, thank
wonderful,
you.
beautiful presentation. I have just a quick question. What is the book you're working on now, and when can you come back and present it to us?
Oh yeah. So it was a little bit of a slow burn. This book came out in late 2016. I spent all of 2017 like really lucky and thankful that I spoke about it over 300 times across the country. And then I got pregnant in 2018 and had my son in 2019. So I was kind of just conceptualizing ideas, and anyone that has kids know that those first years are rough. So now he's a year and a half. So I've started to work on a new project. It's called Once Upon a Time, and it draws from the fairy tale preamble, but it's not going to be about a fairy tale. It's going to look at local history in the Hudson Valley and kind of New York, and even up in the Catskills, places that are unnoticed, histories that are unaware, from sites of the Underground Railroad that are unmarked to places like local lore and legend like Rip Van Winkle, and all different kind of strange, quirky places. I'm looking at the land where I live, and that's where I live. So it's going to have like a little bit of text and image, and that's the plan.
We look forward to it.
Yeah, I look forward to it too. I can't rush it because it's like I'm still kind of a new mom, but I'm working on it quite a bit this spring, and I hope in a couple of years it'll be out.
So, I mean, personally, I think your photos are stunning.
Thank you.
Stunningly haunting, but yet they leave me feeling optimistic and with this sense of renewal. And I hope to be able to drive up 17 one day with my new grandson and more grandchildren and explain what the meaning of that was to our family. Maybe there'll be a good place for us to stay that's not a casino.
There's so many places. So the last link I'm going to leave you with is Sullivan Catskills, which links you to so many different hotels and Airbnbs and restaurants. And there's really, my book makes it look like nothing's going on there, but the book came out 4 years ago. And if you look in the Times and the Wall Street Journal, and Hadassah recently did a piece about like young Jews in the Catskills, and there's really a lot of things going on there. Shawanga Lodge, yeah. I used to know Abby Dan, who owned the Shawanga Lodge. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone for being here, and thank you, and I hope you all continue to be well, and that
stay safe, buy the book.
Thank you,
and enjoy it at home.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Marissa.
Thank you all so much for having me.